And here we go again. It's Tuesday. No, it's Monday. Oh boy, I'll tell you, it's quite a day here today. No, it is Tuesday, no doubt about it. Okay, Tuesday, it's 12 o'clock noon Eastern time right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Coming in live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, or on most of your podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon. But we're on most of them, so we're not that hard to find. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. Got a big show coming up today for all you baseball fans. We do have 3 selections coming up for you today. I know we've been kind of not going on too much the past couple of days with baseball, but only because there was nothing to play. You know, there's always in that philosophy of saying we just don't want to throw some games out at you, okay, that quickly, just to show you that we've got some plays for you. The whole idea is to try to stay within a pattern in a type of mode of who you follow, system that you're working with, and you stick with it to see how it does. So we've been working on this one system most of the season, doing very good on it as far as we're concerned, and over 50% bracket very easily. So when they don't have anything to play, we don't have anything to tell you about. But today we do have 3 games to talk about. We're going to be talking about the Milwaukee Brewers against Cincinnati, the Red Sox against the Astros, and the New York Yankees, who have fallen on some hard times lately, up against the Twins. And of course, in basketball, you got the tournament going on still. We're going to be taking a closer look at the Hawks and the 76ers, the Clippers and the Jazz. And of course, as usual, we're going to take a look at whatever happened yesterday as far as betting is concerned in the sports world as well. And also, to kind of give you an idea, there is some news of not another state coming on board, but an entire country coming on board. Canada is getting ready to join us as far as legalizing sports betting. So we'll tell you about that as well. And if we have some time, we're also going to talk about some college football, because once again, like the NFL, we're less than 100 days away from starting off the college football season. So we've got to start kind of thinking and looking a little bit in that direction as well. So we're going to take a little look at Alabama, see what Vegas thinks about them, get some comments from some of the sports books directors that are running the show, kind of giving ideas to what their thinking is on the upcoming schedule in college football. But in the meantime, let's first start out by taking a look at what happened yesterday in the 3 major sports: baseball, basketball, and hockey. So to start off with, in the National Hockey League, the Islanders, a plus 165 on the money line, upset the Bruins 5-4, and now they take that 3-2 lead in the second round of the NHL playoffs. They flew over that 5-goal mark with 9 goals altogether, so that's the way it went with that game. Now, as far as the Canadians, they're a minus 145 on the money line. They beat the Jets 3-2 in overtime. So they swept that series against the Jets 4-0. And of course, they stayed under the 5. And as far as the point total was concerned in goals, the favorites and the dogs, the home and the road, the overs and the unders, they all split 1-1 for last night. The favorites still lead 32-27 overall in the playoffs. Home teams are at 32-30, and the unders lead at 32-29, which is 52.5%. Meanwhile, in the NBA, the Suns, 6-point favorites, covered in their win against the Nuggets, 122-105. That's game 1 of their second round series. In the total went over the 222 points. Meanwhile, the Nets, as a 2-point dog, upset the Bucks 125-86. So it looks like the Nets may very well be for real this coming season in these playoffs. So they now have a 2-0 lead. They closed as underdogs, and they stayed under the total of 238. The favorites still lead 32-15 straight up. and 30-17 against the spread, which is at almost 64% overall. Now, the home teams are 25-22 against the spread, which is a little over 53%. And if you're one of the zigzag people out there, you're 15-21 against the spread. You're almost at 42%. The overs are at 25-21. That's at 54%. So that's the story with the NBA. And like I said, we do have two games we're going to take a look at. We're going to check the line movement and see in which direction the pros are going on two games for today between the 76ers and the Hawks, and of course the Clippers against the Jazz. Meanwhile, in Major League Baseball, the favorites went 3-0. The Red Sox is a minus 195 on the money line against the Marlins. The Angels are minus 150 against the Royals, and the Padres are minus 110 against the Cubs. They all won, and they also covered on the run line of 1.5. The favorites lead 479 to 372. That's just a little over 56% so far on the season. The overs went 2-1, but the unders still hold the lead at 427 to 426. It's only a one-game lead, but they are ahead right now by one. So that's the story with Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the National Hockey League. So that kind of brings you up to date as to what happened yesterday as far as wagering is concerned. But of course, for a moment there, I started telling you about what's going on up in Canada because they're closing in on that sports betting. You know, there's a widespread legalization of sports betting. And of course, it's not just in the United States, because if everything goes well now, our neighbors or friends to the north, they could be joining us pretty soon. Late last week, a bill known as the Safe and Regulated Sports Betting Act passed through Canada's Senate in their Committee on Banking, Trade, and Commerce. The bill would legalize single-game sports, including mobile betting, across all of Canada. It now heads back to the Senate, where they think lawmakers will debate the bill and call witnesses to speak on the behalf of the measure. Now, once deliberations are stopped, a final vote's going to be taken. The Canadian Parliament has until the end of June to pass the bill and get it signed into law. If it passes, sports betting could launch in Canada by the end of the year. Of course, the whole idea is to try to get in there before the NFL season starts, because that's where the big money is. But, right now, sports betting is kind of legal in a lot of Canada, but only if you're playing parlays. So if this bill does pass, which is the bill happens to be a ban on single game wagering. You can bet parlays, but you can't bet single games. Now, one of the biggest advocates for legalization has been the CFL, the Canadian Football League. Of course, why not? Canada represents a massive, largely untapped market, okay? You got a population of over 37 million people, which is just slightly less than California. California is at almost 40 million. Canada is also the home to 7 NHL teams, plus the Blue Jays, and of course the Toronto Raptors in basketball. So that's the story on Canada. As far as being a contrarian, well, I love to hear that kind of stuff, because you're going to bring new people into the fold. They're going to be usually the casual bettors or people with bringing their biases in once again. It's only going to help us contrarians as we go down the road. The more people we invite to the party, the better it is for us, because they bring certain things with them, which is very helpful to us here as contrarians. So let's take the first break. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at those two basketball games on tap for tonight, give you an idea as to how the line movement is going, as well as in which direction the pros are going as well. So we'll be back into the sports wagering zone in 1 minute. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. We're coming to you live on this Tuesday afternoon, morning, depending on what time zone you happen to be in. Coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, Blackjack TV on the East Coast, in the Colorado area, milehighradio.com, and also on most of your other podcast platforms, such as Spotify or Apple Podcast or Amazon. So we can be found just about anywhere at any time. And of course, we thank you very much for listening. We really do appreciate you listening to the show. So in the meantime, let's take a look and see where the action is going in two of tonight's NBA games on tap. First of all, at 7:30, the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this is game two. It's in the Eastern Conference and it's their semifinal matches. The Hawks lead the series 2-1 because they took the opener 128 to 124. They won that game outright, even though they were 4.5-point dogs in that game. Now, in tonight's rematch, the 76ers opened as a 5.5-point home favorite. 76ers, 5.5-point home favorite. The public expects a bounce back effort from Philadelphia, and they're betting and laying the points with the Sixers. However, there's always a however, despite all this lopsided support, and it's very high, we've seen the 76ers number drop down from 5.5 down to being a 5-point favorite. And of course, you know what that means. That's called the reverse line movement. That means the pros are on the Hawks. They're taking the hook, and they got in at about 5.5. Down to 5, still a good bet at 5. The Hawks are also contrarian values. They're an unpopular road dog in what's going to be a very heavily bet primetime game. The total opened at 223, but it hasn't really moved much off of that. Now, keep this in mind. When the total is 220 or more, the over is at 68% so far in the postseason. Now, 76ers big guy Joel Embiid, he's questionable once again for this game, but he really is expected to play. The question is, how valuable will he be on the court? And despite trailing in the series 1-0, Philadelphia is still a short minus 130 favorite to move up into the next round. And those are the odds from BetMGM. The Hawks, on the meanwhile, are plus 110 dogs to win the series. Okay, so the Hawks and the 76ers coming in. The pros like the Hawks, the general public very heavily in on the 76ers. And of course, like we said, when the total is 220 or more, right now it's at 223, hasn't moved at all so far. The over is at 68%. The pros are on the over in this game. Meanwhile, at 10 o'clock, the late game out on the coast. Los Angeles Clippers going to Utah to play the Jazz, and this is the first game of that Western Conference semifinal. The Clippers coming off that Game 7 win over the Mavericks, while the Jazz, they kind of very easily knocked off the Grizzlies in 5 games this playoff season. Now, the line opened with the Jazz as a short 4-point home favorite. 4-point home favorite was the opening. Meanwhile, the public, they're all over the Jazz. They're laying that short spread. They're at home on their own home court, especially they also have that significant rest advantage because their last game was June 2nd compared to the Clippers' last game on June the 6th. But as usual, there's also, however, Utah being the popular play, we've seen the line drop from that number 4 down to being a 3.5-point favorite. So what this means, once again, the pro action buying low on the Clippers, taking the points. The pros also have targeted the under in this game. Total that opened at 221.5 has dropped down to 220.5, despite the public really coming in heavy on the over. So this generally means there's a lot of big money coming in on the other side. And when you're saying that kind of a move, you know the pros are on the under. I'm sorry. This is a classic pro reverse line under move as we take a look at it. Now, the big injury to monitor here is the Utah's point guard, Mike Conley. Now, he's also listed as questionable because he has a hamstring injury. The Jazz are slight minus 140 favorites to win the entire series. The Clippers are dogs at plus 115. Now, take a look and make sure you see whether or not Mike Conley will be playing. But even if he is playing, once again, just as in the Philadelphia game, the question is going to be as to what good he will be doing on the court. So in this particular game, the pros are on the Clippers, and in both games, it seems like the pros are on the underdog in both games. So they're on the Hawks against the Sixers, and they're on the Clippers against the Utah Jazz. So those are the two games we took a close look at. We saw the line movement, and we kind of let you know which direction it's going. And, of course, it looks like it's going in the direction of the Hawks and the Clippers for tonight. So that's the story there. So let's take our second break, and when we do come back, we're going to take a look at 3 baseball games on tap for today. You know you baseball fans out there that like to bet baseball or, kind of looking for something else to bet besides basketball. We got 3 games on tap to look at. Milwaukee against Cincinnati, Boston against Houston, and the New York Yankees against the Twins. So those are the 3 games we'll take not a very close look at because, again, we're trying to keep time constriction here, but we'll kind of give you some thoughts and ideas to which direction the pros are going, which is really the most important thing you want to hear. So we're going to take our break. And like we say, if you've listened to the show before, our breaks are only about a minute and a half in length. So if that's the case, we will be back into the zone right after this. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network and podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not going to go through all of them. So thank you. Thank you very much for listening. We totally appreciate it. Now, just in case you tuned in a little late, I'm going to let you know about the 2 games for tonight as far as basketball is concerned. And in this series, Atlanta Hawks, Philadelphia 76ers, pros are on the Atlanta Hawks. The Los Angeles Clippers, and the Utah Jazz, pros in that game are on the Los Angeles Clippers. So in both instances, they are on the underdog in those 2 games. So that's the story there. And kind of give you an idea, once again, because we failed to do this before, as far as the little method system, whatever you want to call it, where we kind of follow where the pros are going and betting with them throughout the series so far. Yesterday, we had the game between Milwaukee and Brooklyn. And I'll tell you, that one, they totally blew out of the water. They missed that one totally. Brooklyn just annihilated Milwaukee in that game. The pros liked Milwaukee. They thought they were going to come back in that game. Meanwhile, the Nuggets and the Suns, they had the right one there. They had the Suns in that game. That was an easy win for them. So far this playoff season, we've been playing with 36 plays, 26 winners. That's still 72%, which is above the general average of the favorites, which are around 63, 64%. So that means somewhere in there they had some underdogs that did come through as well. So that's the story. That's how they did yesterday, half and half. Today you have the Hawks and the Sixers, the Clippers and the Jazz. Both games, Atlanta, Los Angeles, are the picks as far as the line movement in which direction they are going. In the meantime, we got 3 baseball games to look at. Hooray, hooray. All of a sudden. We had nothing on Sunday. We had nothing yesterday. Well, yesterday there were only 3 games on the schedule, so there wasn't much to choose from to begin with. But again, we don't want to just give you games to play. We're following a system. We got a pattern we're looking at, and if they don't fall into that pattern, we don't bet any games. That's just the day that we say, hey, that's it. I'm going to rest today. I'm going to sit back, do some of my homework on the upcoming NFL college football season or whatever it is that you're involved in. And, you take a break. There's always tomorrow. There's always going to be more betting as the days come on. So today is that day. We're looking at 3 games. The first game we're looking at is between Milwaukee and Cincinnati. You got Hauser going for Milwaukee and Sonny Gray, who's having a really, really rough season so far, going for Cincinnati. Now, both teams come into this game having 4 wins. Now, yesterday we kind of talked about the swagger theory. In other words, finding and trying to see how whether it's a trend upward or a trend downward in a team and in which direction they're going. So here you have 2 teams that won their 4 games in a row, the last 4 games they played. Now, the next question has to be as to who they beat. Did they beat a better team or did they beat a lesser team? And so the pros looked at this particular game, I guess, and came up with Milwaukee as being their choice. So in the game between Milwaukee and Cincinnati, the pros are on the Milwaukee Brewers. Meanwhile, Boston and the Astros at home in Boston. Boston has won 5 of their last games. So here you have a team trending upward. The swagger theory comes into play once again. They're at 5. They're probably going to go to 6, according to the way the pros think this game over, seeing as how Perez is going to be pitching for Boston, and he's the better pitcher of the 2. So this is the direction they're going in this game. Boston against the Astros. They are on the Boston Red Sox playing at home, coming off a 5-game, and they're on a 5-game winning streak so far. And like we said yesterday, it's better to be riding a streak upward and missing one than riding a streak on the downward effect, okay, and continue to bet and miss one. So in this particular situation, Boston is their choice. Perez pitching for Boston. Meanwhile, the Yankees and the Twins. The Yankees have really had a rough season so far, especially the past 5 games. They've lost 5 games in a row. But then you look at who they lost to. They lost 4 games to the Boston Red Sox. One of those games, a little controversial because of that last call at the plate that may have provided a win for the Yankees. Been a rough season. If you've been betting the Yankees all season long, it's been a rough situation. Haven't been doing too well, but it looks like now they may be coming out of the pack. They've lost 5 in a row. Can they lose 6? The big question mark is, will they lose 6? Most of the pros seem to think that they're going to start at least coming back a little bit, and they should beat the Twins, especially with Montgomery pitching on the mound today. So they like the Yankees in this game. They like Boston against the Astros, and they like the Milwaukee Brewers against Cincinnati in the National League. So those are the games on tap for today as far as which direction the line movement and the pros are looking at in these three games. We've got a full schedule of baseball, full schedule in basketball, and we also have a full schedule in the National Hockey League as well. So there's something out there for everybody. So that's the story. So I hope you bettors of baseball, if you follow us closely, you kind of look at our recommendations and perhaps go along with some of them. I wish you the best of luck in those games for today as well. So we're going to take our final break, and when we do come back, we're going to take a look at college football because, we're less than 100 days away. College football, NFL, camps are going to be opening soon. Got to start thinking about which direction you're going to be going. So we're going to take a look and see what Vegas thinks about Alabama. The Crimson Tide, losing almost their entire starting team to the NFL this season. What type of an effect will that have? Is Saban going to be able to pull it out again once again? So let's get that third break out of the way, and we do come back. We're going to take a close look at that, see what Vegas and the sportsbook directors think of this situation, and we'll tell it to you as well. So just a reminder, once again, we're in the sports wagering zone, and we will be back in 1 minute. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, Blackjack Television back on the East Coast, and of course, milehighradio.com as well, and most of your major podcast platforms as well. So thank you very much for listening. We just went over the 2 basketball games for today as far as the pros and their selections, and of course the 3 baseball games as well. We'll recap them once again before we go off the air. In the meantime, let's take a look at some college football news. Let's see if we can start thinking about the upcoming college football season. We're less than 100 days away. It's on its way. You have to start getting ready now. So if you're not a basketball bettor, you don't kind of care, you don't bet baseball either, then you should be now spending more time looking at college football, if you like betting college football or the NFL, whichever direction you're going. Most of the times, most of the bettors like both. If you like one, you usually like the other as well. Now, if there's ever a time to anticipate Alabama's football situation and coach Nick Saban, this is really a time to kind of take a close look at this team. Remember, the first round of last month's draft, it was a roll call for the Crimson Tide, putting Saban in a tight spot because he faces a really tough schedule. And, of course, he lost a lot of his players. He has to replace 2 wide receivers. He lost Jalen Waddle. He lost Devonta Smith. They were drafted in the top 10. 6 players went in the first round. Their quarterback, Mac Jones, to the Patriots. Running back, Najee Harris, to the Steelers. Is this finally the low tide for the Crimson Tide? Well, the way Vegas looks at it, they say, don't bet on it. Don't look at it that way. South Point Sportsbook Director Chris Andrews still power rates Alabama as the nation's number 1 team. And he might be understanding the reigning national champions best. Because after Andrews opened lines on Friday on around 100 of the college football games, Sharp action, the pro action, came in on the Alabama Crimson Tide. One professional handicapper, Paul Stone, said, I bet Alabama 4 times. He flew in from Texas to take shots at Andrews' opening numbers. Now, Andrews made Alabama a 13-point favorite over Miami in that September 4th game at Atlanta. Now, Stone and others laid the points, forcing Andrews to move the line to 16. So I think Miami is going to be really good this year, he says. I don't know if the Hurricanes can hang in there with Alabama as well. Now, Stone also bet on Alabama as a 10-point favorite against Texas A&M, a 17-point favorite against LSU, and a 12-point favorite against Auburn. He said, this is right up my alley. He says, I love to bet college football in late May. Stone said he played a total of 20 games. Some of the South Point's betting limits were $2,000, and Andrews moved a handful of lines 2 or 3 points based on how the pros have been betting. But there were no dramatic differences of opinion between the odds makers and the small collection of pro handicappers who were looking for those soft numbers. And Andrews says, I'm pretty happy with it. We got a lot of play, and there was nothing I was off by 7 or 8 points on. So he's looking at his numbers, and he's trying to see what the pros are doing to kind of make any adjustments that he might have to make. He said, I've probably been working on it since late January. The transfer portal has got my head spinning, and I can't keep up with it as well. It was a weird coming off a COVID year, and it was very hard this year to put his ratings together. Now, even in a reloading year, Alabama is a relatively easy team to rate. Saban recently won his 6th national title, and he capped it off by a 52-24 blowout of Ohio State, if you remember that, back in January, the championship game. So it's a simple exercise to project a lot of the same. The quarterbacks to follow Jones is expected to be a dual threat sophomore. His name is Bryce Young, a former 5-star recruit from where? Not from Alabama, but from California. The other 3 college football playoff finalists also move ahead with new quarterbacks. Ohio State lost Justin Fields, a first-round pick by the Bears. Clemson's Trevor Lawrence went number 1 overall, as you remember, to the Jaguars. Notre Dame's senior Ian Book was a 4th-round pick by the Saints. Now, on the first weekend of September, Clemson is a 3.5-point favorite over Georgia on a game that will be played on a neutral field here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Notre Dame opened as a 6-point favorite at Florida State. Ohio State is a 13-point home favorite against Oregon on September the 11th. Now, Andrews also says that Ohio State loses a lot, but we kind of know what Ohio State is going to be. He lowered Notre Dame about 8 points from where he ended them last year. He says, I think people tend to overrate the Irish. I overrate Oklahoma almost every year, and I have the Sooners as my number 2 ranked team, just behind Alabama. Now, Oklahoma could have the nation's top returning quarterback in Spencer Rattler. Andrews opened the Sooners as 9-point favorites over Texas on October the 9th. The Longhorns' new coach is Steve Sarkisian, the former Alabama offensive coordinator, if you remember. Now, Stone didn't bet on Oklahoma in that Oklahoma-Texas game, but he did take the Longhorns as a 10-point underdog at Iowa State on November the 6th. Andrews adjusted the number to 7. So the sports books look and they respect where the pros are going. They make their adjustments according to what they're doing. He said he was very high on Iowa State, and I got some opposition there. Now, Virginia BYU opened as a pick'em, but the bettors jumped on the Cougars to push them to being a 3-point favorite in that October 30th game in Provo, Utah. Andrews said he really downgraded BYU. After it lost their quarterback, Zach Wilson, he became, as you know, the number 2 overall pick by the Jets. Now, following a season of scheduling chaos because COVID-19 bookmakers are carefully writing the house rules, in some instances, rewriting the house rules, even if there are date and site changes. According to South Point rules, if a game is played, it's considered action. He said he's still afraid of the COVID. He says, I don't know what's going to happen. So that's the story on college football. Some things to take a look at. It gives you an idea as to how the pros are looking at college football in the early days here, and also taking a look at how Vegas and the sports books are looking at it as well. So you're getting kind of a feel of how things kind of work as far as numbers are concerned. Sports books come out with the numbers. The pros evaluate those numbers. They match them up against numbers that they think they should be. They start making their bets. You have a $2,000 limit, so the house really can't get hurt that badly. And then the house takes a look at them, and they start making their adjustments accordingly. So that's the respect that the pro bettors have with the sports books, just to kind of get you in on that, to make sure you understand that's a big deal over there in Vegas and throughout the sports book community. We always talk about Vegas, but there are other sports books now in 25 states that are operating now, and Canada is soon to come on board as well. So that's the story with college football. We're going to keep an eye on it. We'll let you know how the odds are moving, kind of get you ready so you can in case you want to make a bet now, okay, on games that are going to be played later on in the season, just as well as the pros are doing right now too. So that's the story as far as college basketball is concerned. Like I said, we'll keep a close eye on it. We'll keep you up to date on that as well. Now, for today, in the NBA playoffs, the pros like the Hawks in this game against the 76ers, and they like the Clippers against the Jazz. Those two happen to be underdogs in those two games. Meanwhile, in baseball, Milwaukee against Cincinnati, the pros like Milwaukee. They kind of Sonny Gray, the pitcher for Cincinnati, is having a tough season so far. Both teams have had 4 wins. One of them is going to come to an end at the end of today. Meanwhile, Boston against the Astros, Houston coming into Boston. Boston coming off a 5-win series so far. They kind of see them going on to their 6th win, mainly because Perez is pitching for Boston. So Yankees against the Twins. Kind of think, even though they lost their 5 games, you have Montgomery going today, and it looks like there's a good possibility that may be turned around today. So as far as the pros are concerned, they like Milwaukee, they like Boston, and believe it or not, they do like the New York Yankees. So that's the story there. I want to thank you very much for listening. And just a reminder, we're here every day, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time, on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of your podcast platforms, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I know Amazon's having some problems. They're being hacked, so perhaps you may not be able to pick anything up on Amazon today because that's their problem. We'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for listening. Those are the games for today. I hope you baseball bettors are happy with the selections, and I hope you're even happier if you do play them and they win, or if you play against them and you win. Either way you go, as long as you win, that's what we care about most of all. So we'll be back again tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern Time, on the I-95 Sports Network. So have a very pleasant Tuesday. Watch the games. If you're going to bet, I wish you the best of luck. If not, just sit back, relax, start working on that college football and that NFL football, because before you know it, the camps will be open, preseason starts, the season starts. You don't want to be left behind. So until tomorrow, once again, thank you very much for listening. I'm Chris Pardo, coming to you live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network in Charlotte, North Carolina. Goodbye, everybody.